Cool. So yeah, this interview is basically going to be talking about your new album, The Returner, just getting your thoughts on it and your upcoming performance at the Arc.
Yes, I'm so excited to come back to Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's always an honor to play at the Arc. It has so much beautiful history and good ghosts and good mojo in the walls. Yeah.
So that's a super cool. And yeah, I know that Michigan is one of your go-to places to perform. And my first question is, what are you looking forward to doing the most once you hit Ann Arbor?
Ooh, well, let's see. I just always love walking around
Mhm.
downtown and checking out the record stores. And, I always go poking into the record stores and see what I can find. And I always go poking into secondhand shops and see what I can find. I'm a big thrifter for clothes. I love pre-loved clothes, and keeping things out of landfills.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love just walking around town. I might try and do a yoga class if we get in with enough time. We'll see. Yeah.
All right. And regarding the performance itself, this is normally backwards because I normally talk about what you're doing at the show later. But yeah, it's nice to talk about it now. So
In
what can
advance. Yeah.
yeah. Is there anything that you're looking forward to doing at the show in particular?
Well, I'm always in awe of the ARC audience because it's such a loving, music loving, listening audience. And so I just, it's circle work. I always say that every show is different because the people that show up to engage with us in joyful assembly and creative communion each night are different. And so it's a different show every night, and I'm always looking forward to connecting like that. And there might be a little bit of audience participation, but of course it has to be consensual. Consent is sexy. We
Yes,
only do things consensually. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited about, we're partnering with Headcount to register voters at every show. We're partnering with Propeller so that to make music mean more. So any ticket that people buy, a percentage of those tickets are going toward the Trevor Project and the Human Rights Campaign, because I just feel like we're at an all hands on deck juncture in our beleaguered union here in the United States. And there's been a lot of unfortunate demagoguery, fascist, neo fascist talk, and bigoted rhetoric and legislation flying about. And I don't believe that is who the majority of us are at all. And I see that night after night of great people of all different walks of life, of backgrounds and heritages and beliefs, being loving with each other. I'm not interested in tolerance. Tolerance is for mosquitoes. I'm interested in people being accepting of each other and of understanding that we are all equally human, whether you agree with me or not, whether you think, whether you have different ideas about what some divine being might believe. That's between the divine being and whoever. It's not up to the government to make those choices, and it's not up to us to make those choices or judgments upon each other, right? So I
absolutely.
I am always heartened every show because I feel like I see firsthand this beautiful kind of circle of love growing, and that people do recognize that we're one family, that we're equal human beings, whatever our differences, and that our differences are actually glorious riches and nothing to be afraid of. Diversity is not a dirty word. It's literally the condition for all life, the necessary condition for all life on Earth. And
Yeah.
as far as we know, this is the only planet teeming with life in the vast universe. We haven't found another yet. So precious, very precious.
It's
That's what I'm
very
gonna say.
precious. Yeah.
And I know that's sort of tangential, but at the same time, it's not, because I feel like when we gather together in joyful assembly to celebrate music, to engage in a creative performance together, it is a reaffirmation of the beauty and strength and joy and health of diversity,
Yeah.
and I think it grows our empathy. It helps us to be more human and humane with each other. And so that gives me a lot of hope every night. And so I'm just looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the creative communion. I'm looking forward to having fun. I'm really excited about the new songs. I'm touring with an incredible ensemble of extraordinary artists: Elena Canlas, Megan Coleman, Ganessa James. And we might have some special guests. Every stop is different because different friends live in different places.
Mhm.
So there might be some special surprise guests that pop up with us. And I'm looking forward to all of it. Yeah.
That is so cool.
We're
And will the Rainbow Coalition be joining you as well on stage?
Yes, yes, yes. Those are my, we all, basically to me, the Rainbow Coalition is all of us. It's every single person that believes in equality in this world that's striving toward that. Of course, we're all human. We make mistakes. We backslide, we sidestep, we get lost sometimes. But I think that the vast majority of us that I meet in my travels really truly believe in equality, in harm reduction, in working on a world that we're leaving better for the ones to come, whether we see that or not. And whether we are parents ourselves or not, we are all the good ancestors, hopefully, of the next generations of humans, and not just humans, but all the life that we affect on this planet. So I just think there's something really sacred to me about live shows. I'm not like a religious person. I would say I'm a hopeful agnostic, if anything. But I feel a deep spirituality around the sharing of music, the creation of music and the sharing of music. And it is sacred to me. And so I really, really, I don't take it lightly when people spend their time and their money to come and be in circle with us. And I honor it, and I'm thrilled by it, and it's always, always joyful. So we're never gonna leave, but we're gonna leave it all on the floor. We're not gonna hold anything back. That's what we do every night.
Absolutely. All right. So, but I believe you froze a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I back?
All right, you're back. You're
Am I
back.
back?
All right. So with
Okay,
that
I'll
being
stop.
said,
Maybe I'll stop moving and
no, you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. All right. So
okay.
I want to talk about the album. Well, speaking of music, um,
Yeah.
so with the album, I've listened to it a bajillion times at this point. I have my
Oh,
perception of
I'm
what
honored.
I have my perception of what the album means to me, but I would much rather hear it from you. What is the meaning of this album to you?
I think if I had to distill it down to one line, it's a record very much grounded in the present. It's about re-embodiment. It's about joy and being exactly who we are in exactly this time right now. Joy as resistance, stealing joy from the teeth of turmoil. It's about the beauty of leaning into our circles of chosen family and creative community, of them being there for us, of us being there for them, and of the whole always, always, always being greater than the sum of the parts. I think in a nutshell, that's what it is to me.
That's super cool. Okay, okay. Yeah, all right. That is amazing. I love that answer versus
But
the one.
also, I never ever want to take away, I never want to take away anyone else's journey with the work, because once I put it out there, it's yours as much as
Yeah.
it's mine or anybody's, right? It's anyone who chooses to engage with the work, it becomes theirs, and it changes meaning for each person. And I think that's the alchemy and the magic and the beauty and the mystery of music.
I appreciate that so much. I was listening to it, and the one constant thing, well, there were constant themes throughout, but the one thing that I was gathering was like this idea of cleansing, of like just
Of which,
cleansing, of like just experience.
oh,
Just,
interesting.
that was like the one thing.
Interesting. I love it. I think rebirth, renewal.
Mhm.
I get nervous. It's funny. I have baggage around terms like cleansing. I think of like ethnic cleansing or genetic cleansing. I'm like, no, no. But I know you don't mean it that way.
Yeah,
But
no.
I think if I take your meaning right, I think what you're hearing is this idea of little rebirths constantly, right?
Yes.
That we move, that we can survive hard things, that we move through them, that we essentially are birthing and rebirthing ourselves constantly throughout our lives. We're all returners, right? I think about the human experience, and it starts, trauma unfortunately is the mother of empathy for humanity. Like being born is traumatic. There's a reason we don't remember it, you
Yeah.
know and and I think that we are so afraid, particularly I think in our North American and Western cultures, we have a lot of fear about just life, the whole cycle of life, from shrouding birth in fear to shrouding death in fear, instead of embracing both points as natural, beautiful parts of our human life cycle. And I think we fear life sometimes. I think about, condos, those new build condos where you're not allowed to have children or old people or animals or anything. And I'm like, y'all are afraid of life. Like, come on, like this is where it's messy and it's beautiful and we don't have to be afraid, And again, not casting aspersions at anyone that chooses to live that way. If you want to kind of be in a bubble, that's your prerogative, right? Like I'm all about freedom, and that's someone's prerogative. But I do think it shows a kind of a fear, of life, of living, of the mess and the glory of life. It is messy, of course it is. Like why wouldn't it be? Like and it's brilliant and it's miraculous and it's all the things. So yeah, I don't know. I think that for me, making this record was the most joyful, empowered I have ever felt as a writer, as a co-producer. I stepped into the co-producer's chair on this album, this second, under my own name, solo in name only, because of course this album has so many parents. It was myself and 15 other women, 3 chosen brothers. We recorded 10 songs in 6 days. And we did it in one of the most magical studios I've ever been in. It's now called Henson Studios, but it used to be called A&M Studios when it was owned by A&M Records. And it started its life as Charlie Chaplin Studios in West Hollywood. And we wound up there because we got to work with 2 of our musical heroes on this record, our big sisters, Wendy and Lisa, Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman, who many of you, if you don't know their names, you know their music, because if you've ever heard Prince's Purple Rain, you heard Wendy and Lisa. And they were part of my favorite iteration of Prince's band, The Revolution, for several years, and so many, seminal, definitive, towering, timeless recordings that have influenced certainly everybody in my circle, deeply influenced everybody in my circle. And we were so lucky to get to work with Wendy and Lisa for this whole record on The Returner. They became our big sisters. It was women from the ages of 22 to 62 on the floor making this record together. And we literally did it in circle because we were in Studio D at the old A&M Henson Studios. And it's a really big, beautiful room with high ceilings and little kind of glass booths around it. So you can have some separation, but still see each other. And we recorded it literally in circle. And then when we, like I sang my lead vocals live with the band. I played clarinet often live with the band from my little booth where I could see everyone. And then we would all go back into the same room where we had just recorded the song. We usually did 3 takes. And then, we would pick the best of 3. And usually it was the second take that everyone felt the most excited about. And then we would go back in and we'd like overdub the harmonies. And that's all, like when you hear Springtime and there's laughter, it's us in the room together laughing and having the best time, singing those harmonies together. When you hear those extraordinary strings, that's Larissa Maestro and Sister Strings who worked on the string arrangements. It's them playing those, in real time. And, and it's just like, it's so incredible,
Those strings captured my heart.
Isn't it amazing? So that's Larissa Maestro wrote most of the string arrangements. Sister Strings did the string arrangement for Eve Was Black. They all played it all together. And then on a couple of the songs, like The Returner and Stay Right Here, they were joined by an amazing LA-based string player named Karenza Peacock. What a name. What a great name. And Sister Strings is Monique and Shanti Ross. They're really sisters. Their band is extraordinary. They're touring now full-time with Brandi Carlile. They were just on a crazy tour of stadiums, opening for Pink with Brandi Carlile. They're just superstars. And they are working on a new album now under their own name. And I'm so excited for the world to hear them because I think we're all going to know their names by this time next year. I really do. I think they're absolute superstars. Larissa Maestro is playing in Hosier's band. And actually, I'm going to go see them. I'm in Nashville, home in Nashville for a couple days before the tour starts. And I'm going to get to go hear them tonight at Ascend Amphitheater, which they sold out in 3 seconds. And Larissa is playing in Hosier's band. And she's a huge part, right on the front line, singing, playing cello, playing guitar, playing keys, like just being the superstar that she is. So, and that they are, I should say, because they, them pronouns and she, her pronoun. Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just so proud of the entire group of artists. And I think that the joy to me of the record, I hope, is that people can hear that and feel it and feel invited into our circle together. And I am just like so grateful.
All right. So the more I listen to this album, the more questions I wrote down. I wrote down at least 30 questions, but I know I can only boil it down to like 7 or 8.
I love that you have questions. It's such an honor that you went in so deep. Like I don't take that for granted at all. It's a lot to ask people to take a whole album journey. You know, I know how precious and how hard to come by unbroken time is in all of our lives, all of our, you know, overly busy, overly stressed, cortisol inducing lives, you know, and it's like, so the fact that you took that journey with my record, I don't take it lightly.
I
Oh,
appreciate it so much.
yeah.
So my question is, all right, the album is absolutely, it's powerful, it's brilliant, but like, what was the first step? Because I know Eve Was Black was the nucleus of the album.
Yeah,
Was
and
it like,
that I wrote long before the other songs actually. That came first. And
oh,
I didn't fully realize that it was the heart of the record until later. It wasn't until we wrote Demons
mhm.
and Snake Life and I was like, "Oh, this is a trilogy within the record." Like that to me, you know, in my nerdy way, and no one else needs to know this. You don't have to go down this nerdy rabbit hole with me. But if you want to, I'll tell you that Eve Was Black, Snake Life, and Demons are like they're like the backbone of the record to me.
And
And they're
how,
a trilogy within a trilogy because The Returner is actually the second volume of a trilogy. Outside Child was the first volume as a record, my first solo record. The Returner is the second volume, and then the third volume will be uh, the future. So broadly, Outside Child is the past. Broadly, The Returner is the present, and broadly, the third record will be the Rainbow Coalition Afro-Future of my dreams.
so that was like my next question, because I noticed throughout those albums there was a constant theme of talking about demons, but it's constant throughout the album. But those 3 songs are more, that
Yeah,
idea of a demon is more present.
yeah, and playing with what does that mean? What do we even mean when we're talking about demons, right? Is
Mhm.
it inner demons? Is it the fact that we, as Black diaspora, as descendants of the African diaspora, have been demonized and continue to be demonized in this culture? Is it the way that we dehumanize and demonize each other on a daily basis, misunderstanding one another? And I'm playing with all of those things, you know, and I'm playing, certainly in Demons, I'm playing with some of the, and Eve Was Black, religious uh, sort of tropes that have been used against my Black and queer communities a lot, and I'm using them for us, you know, and saying, wait a second, wait a minute, okay, you believe in the first mother. Well, humanity is an African species, so the first mother would have been Black. Yes, yes, yeah. So then I'm extrapolating from there, and it's not a calling out; it's a calling in, right? It's going, it's saying, it's reaffirming, it's a reckoning, because it is. I mean, Eve Was Black in particular was kind of an open letter for me to my, you know, I was adopted by and raised by a very violent white supremacist American expat father. You know, I was born and raised in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, but my adoptive father was born and raised in a sundown town in Indiana, you know, born in 1936. So old enough to be my grandparent, old enough to be my mother's father. Um, my mom was a baby when she had me, very, very, very young. Like she's more like my big sister almost. You know, she was only 17 when she had me. And I think about, my mom is white. My biological father is Black from Grenada, but I didn't get to meet him until I was 30 years old, my biological father. And now I'm happy to say I have a beautiful relationship with my biological father and my whole Black family, my Grenadian, Canadian, amazing Caribbean Canadian family that I adore. And I'm so lucky. And they're, you know, it's Grandpa Michael and Nana Tessa for my daughter Ida, and she's known them her whole life. There's no, you know, we've been able to heal a generational trauma in real time for Ida. And I'm really grateful for that, you know. But I was raised by this very toxic person who was abused ideologically in the US. And this is what I mean when I talk about our interconnectedness. The racism, the painful, unresolved history, the lack of reparation or restitution for any of the harm that was done to our diaspora that built the empire of the United States, you know, and paid for it dearly. Not only we're not paid for our labor, but we're continue to be given second class citizen treatment, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And continue to be the redlining continues, the preferential loaning of banks that does not include us continues, the kind of inside white boys clubs of grift and reward continue. Meanwhile, a Black mom needing food stamps gets demonized and villainized, right? So when I'm talking about demons, I'm playing with so many different ideas of what we demonize in our culture and why, and how much of that is actually bound up in intergenerational trauma and guilt on the part of white folks, or intergenerational trauma that is unresolved for Black folks, queer folks, anybody with an intersectional identity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that answer, by the way.
Yeah.
So I just had a couple more questions. I do have one selfish question that's more so for me. I love her so much. I love
She's
her.
so sweet. Millie, come say hi. Come say hi. Hey, Millie. Millie the Moocher. Adopt, don't shop.
So my first question, this is a bit of a more selfish question, more for me. The more I listen to the album, the song "Stay Right Here," the
Yeah.
lyrics are the lyrics. The more that I dug into like researching you, it's dark. The more I understand but it's just opposed to this upbeat, happy instrumentation. So can you just tell me about the backstory behind that song? Because that song has been on a replay nonstop.
Yeah, I love that you heard that, because I think a lot of the time people, when the music sounds upbeat, they're like, oh, it's a disco number. I'm like, well, not really. Dig in on it. But it's not. It's interesting that you hear it as dark, and I know what you mean. It's heavy, but I don't. I think of it as it is reaffirming that we choose every day to live, to be present. For myself as a mom, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I have struggled, having been raised by abusive white supremacists. What that did to me was it turned inward into self-hatred, right? And it is, my decolonizing process is ongoing, and it will be for my whole life. And I think all of us, to some degree, are decolonizing our minds our whole lives, and unlearning and learning better, and all of the process of being a human alive in this time, with all that we have inherited from the generations before, and that we have to do the best that we can with, and unpack and defang and declare sometimes y'all have no power over us, and that's really what that song is. It's saying, it was a few things. I was writing it for my daughter. I was thinking about the woman life freedom movement in Iran. I was thinking about the bravery of those women who know that they might get killed simply by uncovering their hair, but are forging ahead as freedom fighters, because the alternative is worse. The alternative of doing nothing and continuing to live under a theocratic dictatorship, and is not what they want for their daughters, or their sons for that matter, or their children of all genders, and it is like that conviction. I was feeling very galvanized by the bravery and the courage that they bring to their freedom fight. And I was thinking about how dire as things can feel sometimes for us here in the US or in Canada, where I'm from. Most of us are not putting our lives on the line when we are speaking our truth, when we are resisting oppression, when we are resisting fascist legislative terrorism, as we have been doing for months now here in Nashville and in Tennessee. Most of us don't have to risk our lives to fight for freedom. And I was thinking, it's a call to courage to myself, but also a commitment to continuing to put the ideal and the practical, and not just ideal, the practical necessity of equaling and valuing equally every single human. We need all the brains. We need to value all the brains. Let's take gender, color, orientation, identity, everything out of it. We need, when it comes down to it, if we are devaluing half the brains or more on the planet for these absurd, superficial reasons, such as perceived gender or perceived skin color or so-called race, which we know as a fallacy. We're one human race. That has been long since debunked. the human genome has been mapped. There's no such thing as separate races of humanity. We're one human race, you know. Of course, heritage, color, ethnic history, geographic history, of course, you know, those things are real. I'm not talking about some sort of impoverishing color blindness. Like, no, celebrating all of our glorious colors, differences, which are our riches, but also acknowledging that we're in fact one human species, one human family. Anyway, tangential, but that notion that we are, you know, that we are rededicating ourselves to our equality is undeniable. Our equality is intrinsic, it is inalienable, it is undeniable. But the fight is having that recognized and protected under the law, equally under the law, globally here, but globally everywhere, right? And the fight that women are, and not just women, people of all genders in Iran are fighting for freedom. That fight is not different from the fight here. That it is all connected. And if that kind of injustice is happening anywhere, we are all diminished and affected by it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, working on a world that we might not see, but that we want to be better for those that are to come. You know, that notion of being good ancestors, and that's something that Indigenous peoples have been telling us and trying to teach us for thousands and thousands of years. You know.
Nice. All right. Do I have time for two more questions, or you know?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Cool. So regarding the album itself, in your opinion, what was the most rewarding part of this project?
Oh, it was just the joy of being in a creative group like that and having that kind of trust, having that kind of openness, magical things occurring because of that trust. It's a trust fall to make a record that way. To make a record like that in 6 days with 16 people is a trust fall. But that's where I feel proud of myself as a producer, in that I knew how to cast the room. And I learned that notion from my friend Joe Henry, who also introduced us to a very beloved Michiganer, who also introduced us to Wendy and Lisa, you know. And years ago, my band Birds of Chicago, we made a record with Joe Henry. He was our producer. And we made that record. It was called Real Midnight in 4 days. And I learned about how important casting the room is and building trust is. And I want to give a huge shout out to Brandon Bell, who is our engineer for The Returner and mixer, because he did a magical thing of kind of mixing on the go, so that when we would go back and listen after the first take, it already sounded like an album. So that builds everybody's confidence. Then you go back in there feeling great, and you don't get bogged down in insecurity or little things. You're in the slipstream of creativity together. And that was what was so beautiful about this record. Everybody was approaching it with the same openness, with the same worship of the muse over affectation, of song over insecurity or self-aggrandizement. It was very much about the collective work. And I think that in order to make good music, you need to be able to work in circle and work in community. And in order to be a good human on the planet, you have to be able to live in circle and live in community, you know? And I think it's reflected, like what's required to make a beautiful record is also what's required to make a beautiful society and planet, a beloved community, you know?
All right, I just got one more question.
Yeah.
Regarding this album, what did it teach you about yourself?
It taught me that I've come a long way, that I have actually come a long way as an evolving human, as a mother, as beginning to really truly be able to love myself the way that I love others, bit by bit. That has been my biggest challenge because of the way I grew up, with the kind of abuse that I grew up with and trauma that I grew up with. But also it taught me that I have one of the most amazing communities, chosen families, friend groups in the world, and how lucky I am, and that I need to treasure them and hold them close and lift them up at every opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this interview.
Yeah.
So it was the wonderful Allison Russell. Thank you so much for that.
It's my pleasure. It's so nice to meet you, Tony Anthony.
Nice to meet you as well. Where's Millie? Millie?
Millie, you want to say bye? you want to say bye to
Oh, I
Tom?
love her so
She's
much.
like, I want to get. So we're in Shelby Bottoms, which is this beautiful green space that goes
Mhm.
through the middle for miles through the middle of Nashville, where I've been making Nashville my home for the last 6 years for work. You know, songwriters it's so stereo. The songwriters move to Nashville for work. You know, but it's been. I love this green space. It's so beautiful. And people ride their bikes and. There's dogs, and there's deer, and all kinds of flora and fauna. It's joyful. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Uh,
much for this interview.
it's so lovely talking to you. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Thank you for listening so deeply.
Absolutely. All right. You have
Yeah.
a good one.
Will we get to see you at this show? Because you'll be our guest if you want to come, of course.
I would love it. I would absolutely love
Yeah.
it.
You'll be our guest of honor. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I appreciate it.
Yeah.